Troy plot summary starring Brad Pitt and Sean Bean. In ancient Greece, King Agamemnon of Mycenae finally unites the Greek kingdoms after decades of warfare, forming a loose alliance under his rule. Achilles, a heroic Greek warrior who fights for Agamemnon, deeply despises him. Meanwhile, Prince Hector of Troy and his younger brother Paris negotiate a peace treaty with Menelaus, king of Sparta. However, Paris is having an affair with Menelaus' wife, Queen Helen, and smuggles her aboard their homebound vessel. Upon learning of this, Menelaus meets with Agamemnon, his elder brother, and asks him to help take Troy. Agamemnon agrees, as conquering Troy will give him control of the Aegean Sea. Agamemnon has Odysseus, king of Ithaca, persuade Achilles to join them. Achilles eventually decides to go after his mother. Thetis tells him that though he will die, he will be forever glorified. In Troy, King Priam welcomes Helen when Hector and Paris return home, and decides to prepare for war. The Greeks eventually invade and take the Trojan beach, thanks largely to Achilles and his Myrmidons. Achilles has the temple of Apollo sacked, and claims Briseis, a priestess and the cousin of Paris and Hector, as a prisoner. He is angered when Agamemnon spitefully takes her from him, and decides that he will not aid Agamemnon in the siege. The Trojans meanwhile have assembled their full army of 25,000 warriors and discuss what to do about the Greek invasion. General Glaucus holds confidence in Troy's defenses and the skill of their soldiers, however others argue for diplomacy, prompting Paris to declare he will challenge Menelaus for the right to Helen. The Trojan and Greek armies meet outside the walls of Troy. During a parley, Paris offers to personally duel Menelaus in exchange for Helen and the city being spared. Agamemnon, intending to take the city regardless, accepts. Menelaus wounds Paris and almost kills him, but is himself killed by Hector, who breaks the rules of mortal combat to save his brother. Agamemnon orders the Greeks to crush the outnumbered Trojan army. In the ensuing battle, tens of thousands of warriors engage in brutal hand-to-hand combat. Hector spots and manages to kill Ajax after a fierce duel, and thousands of Greek soldiers fall to the battle-hardened Trojan archers and infantrymen. Agamemnon is forced to order the retreat, during which hundreds more of the Greeks fall. He gives Briseis to the Greek soldiers for their amusement, but Achilles saves her. Later that night, Briseis sneaks into Achilles' quarters to kill him. Instead, she falls for him and they become lovers. Achilles then resolves to leave Troy, much to the dismay of Patroclus, his cousin and protégé. Despite Hector's objections, Priam orders him to retake the Trojan beach and force the Greeks home, but the attack unifies the Greeks and the Myrmidons enter the battle. Hector duels a man he believes to be Achilles and kills him, only to discover it was actually Patroclus. Distraught, both armies agree to stop fighting for the day. Achilles is informed of his cousin's death and vows revenge. Wary of Achilles, Hector shows his wife Andromache a secret tunnel beneath Troy. Should he die and the city fall, he instructs her to take their child and any survivors out of the city to Mount Ida. The next day, Achilles arrives outside Troy and challenges Hector. The two duel until Hector is killed, and Achilles drags his corpse back to the Trojan beach. Priam sneaks into the camp and implores Achilles to return Hector's body for a proper funeral. Ashamed of his actions, Achilles agrees and allows Briseis to return to Troy with Priam, promising a 12-day truce so that Hector's funeral rites may be held in peace. He also orders his men to return home without him. Agamemnon declares that he will take Troy regardless of the cost. Concerned, Odysseus concocts a plan to infiltrate the city. He has the Greeks build a gigantic wooden horse as a peace offering and abandon the Trojan beach, hiding their ships in a nearby cove. Priam orders the horse be brought into the city. That night, Greeks hiding inside the horse emerge and open the city gates for the Greek army, commencing the sack of Troy. The soldiers of Troy attempt to defend the city but are ultimately overwhelmed and massacred, while their families are taken as slaves or slaughtered. While Andromache and Helen guide the Trojans to safety through the tunnel, Paris gives the sword of Troy to Aeneas, instructing him to protect the Trojans and find them a new home. As the Greek army penetrates the citadel, Glaucus leads the remaining Trojan warriors in a valiant last stand. The Trojans kill many Greeks, but are unable to stop them, with Glaucus being killed by Odysseus. Agamemnon kills Priam and captures Briseis, who then kills Agamemnon. Achilles fights his way through the city and reunites with Briseis. Paris, seeking to avenge his brother, shoots an arrow through Achilles' heel and then several into his body. Achilles bids farewell to Briseis and watches her flee with Paris before dying. In the aftermath, Troy is finally taken by the Greeks and a funeral is held for Achilles, where Odysseus personally cremates his body. More about Troy movie. Troy is a 2004 epic historical war film directed by Wolfgang Petersen and written by David Benioff. Produced by units in Malta, Mexico, and Britain's Shepperton Studios, the film features an ensemble cast led by Brad Pitt, Eric Bana, Sean Bean, and Orlando Bloom. It is loosely based, on Homer's Iliad in its narration of the entire story of the decade-long Trojan War, condensed into little more than a couple of weeks, rather than just the quarrel between Achilles and Agamemnon in the 9th year. Achilles leads his Myrmidons along with the rest of the Greek army invading the historical city of Troy, defended by Hector's Trojan army. The end of the film, the sack of Troy, is not taken from the Iliad, but rather from Quintus Murnius's Posthomerica, as the Iliad concludes with Hector's death and funeral. Troy made over $497 million worldwide, making it the 60th highest-grossing film at the time of its release. However, it received mixed reviews, with critics praising its entertainment value and Pitt's performance, but criticizing its story and unfaithfulness to the Iliad itself. 6. It received a nomination for Best Costume Design at the 77th Academy Awards and was the 8th highest-grossing film of 2004. 7. 300 Movie Plot Summary. In 480 BC, 1 year after the Battle of Thermopylae, Dilios, a hoplite in the Spartan army, begins his story by depicting the life of Leonidas I from childhood to kingship via Spartan doctrine. Dilios' story continues and a Persian herald arrives at the gates of Sparta demanding earth and water as a token of submission to King Xerxes. The Spartans reply by throwing the envoy and his escort down into a bottomless pit. Leonidas then visits the ephors, proposing a strategy to drive back the numerically superior Persians through the hot gates. His plan involves building a wall in order to funnel the Persians into a narrow pass between the rocks and the sea, negating the Persian advantage in numbers, and giving the Greeks' heavy infantry the advantage over the vast waves of Persian light infantry. The ephors consult the oracle, who decrees that Sparta may not go to war during the Carnea. As Leonidas angrily departs, an agent from Xerxes appears, rewarding the ephors for their covert support. Although the ephors have denied him permission to mobilize Sparta's army, Leonidas gathers 300 of his best soldiers in the guise of his personal bodyguard. They are joined along the way by a force composed of a few thousand Arcadians and other Greeks. At Thermopylae, they construct the wall, using slain Persian scouts as mortar. Stelios, an elite Spartan soldier, orders an enraged Persian emissary to return to his lines and warn Xerxes, after cutting off his whipping arm. Meanwhile, Leonidas encounters Ephialtes, a deformed Spartan whose parents fled Sparta to spare him certain infanticide. Ephialtes asks to redeem his father's name by joining Leonidas' army, warning him of a secret path the Persians could use to outflank and surround the Spartans. Though sympathetic, Leonidas rejects him since his deformity physically prevents him from holding his shield high enough, potentially compromising the phalanx formation. The battle begins soon after the Spartans' refusal to lay down their weapons. Using the hot gates to their advantage, as well as their superior fighting skills, the Spartans repel wave after wave of the advancing Persian army. Xerxes personally approaches Leonidas and offers him wealth and power in exchange for his submission. Leonidas declines and mocks the inferior quality of Xerxes' fanatical warriors. In response, Xerxes sends in his elite guard, the Immortals. The Spartans nonetheless defeat them with few losses, with slight help from the Arcadians. On the second day, Xerxes sends in new waves of armies from Asia and other Persian subject states, including war elephants, to crush the Spartans, but to no avail. Meanwhile, an embittered Ephialtes defects to Xerxes, to whom he reveals the secret path in exchange for wealth, luxury, women, and a Persian uniform. The Arcadians retreat upon learning of Ephialtes' betrayal, but the Spartans stay. Leonidas orders an injured but reluctant Dilios to return to Sparta and tell them of what has happened, a tale of victory. In Sparta, Queen Gorgo tries to persuade the Spartan council to send reinforcements to aid the 300. Theron, a corrupt politician, claims that he owns the council and threatens the queen, who reluctantly submits to his sexual demands in return for his help. When Theron disgraces her in front of the council, Gorgo kills him out of rage, revealing within his robe a bag of Xerxes' gold. Acknowledging his betrayal, the council unanimously agrees to send reinforcements. On the third day, the Persians, led by Ephialtes, traverse the secret path, encircling the Spartans. Xerxes' general again demands their surrender. Leonidas seemingly kneels in submission, allowing Stelios to leap over him and kill the general. Angered, Xerxes orders his troops to attack. Leonidas throws his spear at Xerxes, which cuts across and wounds his face, proving the god-king's mortality. Leonidas and the remaining Spartans fight to the last man until they finally succumb to an arrow barrage. Dilios, now back in Sparta, concludes his tale before the council. Inspired by Leonidas' sacrifice, the Greeks mobilize. 1 year later, the Persians face an army of 30,000 free Greeks led by a vanguard of 10,000 Spartans. After one final speech commemorating the 300, Dilios, now head of the Spartan army, leads them to battle against the Persians across the fields to fight the Battle of Plataea, a historical event in which the Greek forces defeated the Persians' invasion in 479 BCE. More about 300 movie. 300 is a 2006 American epic historical action film, 4:5, loosely based on the 1998 comic series of the same name by Frank Miller and Lynn Varley. Both are fictionalized retellings of the Battle of Thermopylae in the Greco-Persian Wars. The film was co-written and directed by Zack Snyder, while Miller served as executive producer and consultant. It was filmed mostly with a superimposition chroma key technique to replicate the imagery of the original comic book. The plot revolves around King Leonidas, Gerard Butler, who leads 300 Spartans into battle against the Persian god-king Xerxes, Rodrigo Santoro, and his invading army of more than 300,000 soldiers. As the battle rages, Queen Gorgo, Lena Headey, attempts to rally support in Sparta for her husband. The story is framed by a voice-over narrative by the Spartan soldier Dilios, David Wenham. Through this narrative technique, various fantastical creatures are introduced, placing 300 within the genre of historical fantasy. 300 premiered at the Austin Butt-Numb-A-Thon on December 9, 2006, and was released at the Berlin International Film Festival on February 14, 2007. Before being released in both conventional and IMAX 8 in the United States on March 9, 2007, and on DVD, Blu-ray disc, and HD DVD on July 31, 2007. The film received mixed reviews, with critics praising its visuals and style but criticizing its depiction of the Persians, which some characterized as bigoted or Iranophobic. Grossing over $456 million, the film's opening was the 24th largest in box office history at the time. A sequel, titled Rise of an Empire, based on Miller's previously unpublished graphic novel prequel Xerxes, was released on March 7,